TV Rain is on the air.
For 12 years, we remained the only independent news channel in Russia. We had to leave, forced out of the country by new repressive laws after the first week of the war. Our freedom crushed by the authorities.
Мы приняли решение, что мы временно приостанавливаем работу телеканала.
We have operated as a European company from Europe and now also broadcast in English.
Kherson has surrendered.
Russia's propaganda targets have changed.
Putin cries havoc. We want to tell you firsthand what is really happening in Russia. Subscribe to TV Rain Newsroom on YouTube and let's take a look at our future together.
Russia tomorrow.
For millions of ordinary Russians, Vladimir Putin's partial mobilization in September brought the war out of their TV screens and into their homes. As hundreds of thousands fled the country to escape being drafted, many more stayed behind and voluntarily answered the draft notices. But mobilization has presented a new set of challenges to society as hundreds of relatives, mostly mothers and wives, have begun protests across Russia in recent weeks, demanding that authorities withdraw their mobilized sons, fathers, husbands and brothers from the front. In a new article by the Moscow Times titled "The Military Betrayed Us, Desperate Relatives of Russian Draftees Seek Answers," Russian journalist Anastasia Tenisheva of the Moscow Times dives into the troubles surrounding Russia's mobilization. Anastasia joins us now to discuss these important developments. Anastasia, thank you so much for joining me here. So, what new information did you find out from the relative of soldiers who were recently mobilized?
Well, when it comes to those mobilized soldiers and their relatives, for example, I guess what strikes me the most is the way how they have been protesting against the way how they have been treated at the front lines, but not against the mobilization in general, or not against Russia's actions in Ukraine, but rather against the fact that they have been sent to the front lines with no military equipment or with no proper military equipment, with no proper military training. And those soldiers and their relatives, their mothers and wives usually, they're just demanding to withdraw those mobilized men and to withdraw recently conscripted soldiers from the front, just to keep them somewhere near the second or third line of defense, for example, as one Russian woman told me during the interview last week. So which is really interesting because in general, like, we also have to understand that they're not against like the war, or for example, not against Russia's actions in Ukraine in general, but rather against how they have been treated and how local authorities or the government in general treat them during the whole process.
Mm-hmm. But do you think that the fact that they are protesting against how they've been treated, could it be understood as a protest against the war? But the protest against the war is banned now in Russia. So maybe that's why they are protesting against the conditions of this mobilization.
Well, I would say yes and no, to be honest, because also like lots of wives and mothers, for example, they told me that they understand why the government just, cannot handle the whole mobilization process. And one woman, for example, even told me that Putin just, cannot keep tracks of everything. So I think it's really complicated, and it's just, takes lots of time to understand the way how everything is handled in Russia. So it's just the beginning, I would say.
Mm. Who are these soldiers? Who are their families? Why did they choose to go to the war? Why did not they escape from the mobilization as a million of Russians did?
Well, those soldiers who managed to tell me why they decided to go to the war usually just tell me that they supported their I wouldn't say like the invasion, because they didn't call it the invasion, but they supported what Russia wants to do in Ukraine, because they usually just believe TV reports and the government. So it's just, as I've said, it's just the beginning of the, like, I think, really long and huge process for them to understand the reality. And when it comes to Russian wives and mothers who have been protesting since like the start of the mobilization, as I know, there are like at least 15 Russian regions, like their biggest concern and the biggest demand, again, as I've said, just the lack of training and poor military equipment, and also those soldiers usually are from very poor regions. They don't have like enough education in some cases, just to probably to understand like the whole situation there. Usually they do believe what the government is saying about the war in Ukraine, about like the Nazi regime there, and about like the whole purpose and the whole goal of the invasion, as Kremlin at least trying to portray it.
I think last question, how does it seem to you, this movement, how big it is? I mean, we will remember how 25 years ago, during the first Chechen war, the Committee of Soldiers' Mothers, it was a huge movement, and it was one of the reasons why President Boris Yeltsin stopped the war in Chechnya. Do you think that this movement now is big enough, or does it have, is there any evidence that this movement will become something big, and that the government will have to listen to them?
Well, just yesterday, for example, Peskov announced that President Putin is expected to meet a group of mothers later this week, reportedly on Sunday. But at the same time, to be honest, I don't think that the discontent is big enough right now to start mass protests in Russia, or to start like any changes in the country. But at the same time, with like more and more reports and with more evidence of like poor conditions at the front lines, and just in general, the way how those mobilized soldiers are treated at military bases, for example, or the front lines, treated by the military commanders, I think that the discontent will just grow and grow among Russian soldiers and as well among their relatives. So like it might be the case as well.
Well, thank you so much, Anastasia Tienishin of the Moscow Times. Thanks for joining us.
TV Rain is on the air.
For 12 years, we remained the only independent news channel in Russia. We had to leave, forced out of the country by new repressive laws after the first week of the war. Our freedom crushed by the authorities.
Мы приняли решение, что мы временно приостанавливаем работу телеканала.
We have operated as a European company from Europe and now also broadcast in English.
Kherson has surrendered.
Russia's propaganda targets have changed.
Putin cries havoc. We want to tell you firsthand what is really happening in Russia. Subscribe to TV Rain Newsroom on YouTube, and let's take a look at our future together.